I am a perfectionist and a procrastinator. Two words that shouldn't really go in the same sentence. Even now, writing this inquiry only a few weeks before the deadline, I still am a perfectionist. Now, that sounds a little contradictory. How can someone be a perfectionist while holding off work to the last minute? Well, I have OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. I not only have a set of rituals and nonsensical tics, but I also have a desire for everything to be perfect. I create grand ideas for a project in my head, but get too overwhelmed with the scale of my idea and end up holding it off. The more I hold it off, the less time I have to make a great product. It's a cycle destined for disappointment and stress. This is to say that Lighthouse also struggles with this. I know many friends and acquaintances that get overwhelmed with big tasks, either because they get in over their heads like me, or because they're used to not having to work hard to get stuff done. Either way, this is a recipe for disaster. In the best case, you barely scrape by and cause a lot of unneeded stress, and in the worst case, you don't do it, in which case, you're not learning, and in some cases, have to switch schools. I've seen and experienced this process time and time again, so for my final inquiry, I'd like to take a look at burnout and perfectionism. What it is, how it works, its importance in our socio-cultural landscape, and how it applies to our school. Burnout is defined as an ongoing state of feeling overwhelmed, fatigued, and emotionally drained due to a constant stress in your work. Gifted kid burnout is defined as a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity, usually starting from childhood and prevailing into adulthood. It can manifest as brain fog, detachment, procrastination, loss of motivation, and difficulty completing basic tasks and self-care. There isn't one attributor to perfectionism and gifted kid burnout. It's a bunch of sociological and cultural factors stemming from childhood. For example, the case of gifted children. Since childhood, you're told that you're exceptional. You're put in advanced classes and constantly validated by letter grades and acknowledgement from teachers, peers, and parents. This is an example of socially prescribed perfectionism, where social and cultural pressures are placed on you to the point where you feel as if you need to be perfect. Otherwise, you'll let them down. In many cases, kids interpret more things as positive than what actually happened, which is called negativity bias, which is when, even when positive feedback things occur, things of a more negative nature have a greater effect on one's psychological state and process. The other type of burnout is self-oriented perfectionism, where you put unrealistic pressures on yourself, otherwise you're letting your own expectations down. It's been widely debated whether or not perfectionism in gifted kids is more due to nature or nurture, but most scholars have agreed that gifted kid burnout is usually a mix of the two. You may have been conditioned as a kid to expect perfection and keep that standard on yourself even without any outside action later on, for example. The reason why burnout is so heavily linked to gifted children is because most gifted children are something called twice exceptional, meaning that they are not only academically talented, but also have a mental disorder, such as ADHD, ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder, OCD, or autism. In fact, burnout isn't actually directly associated with intelligence. It's heavily associated with the challenges that come with gifted or twice exceptional children. Children with neurodivergent brains often experience burnout more intensely than other kids. They often have more of a cognitive response and exhibit brain fog, detachment, and sometimes difficulty completing basic tasks with burnout. Gifted kids also tend to have certain personality traits and temperaments that may make them more vulnerable to burnout. They are often very sensitive, fear failure and rejection, are perfectionists, and sometimes struggle socially. In conjunction with mental disorders, these can lead to complex behavioral concerns that schools are not adequately adapted to support. There are even strong ties between burnout and other mental health issues, like depression, anxiety, low life satisfaction, and even suicide ideation. There has been talk about classifying it as a mental disorder, since that could improve access to treatment. This is also why research on gifted kid burnout hasn't really been widespread, since it's so linked to mental disorders, and there's been a long-standing stigma around that. A study from Nina Herron, Vera Wahlberg, and Henry Trabrel, titled Studying Social Media Burnout and Problematic Social Media Use, the Implication of Perfectionism and Metacognitions, analyzed the link between ample Instagram and Facebook use and burnout. They found that overconsumption of these platforms correlated to 4 out of 5 of the metacognition. Social media also negatively affects anxiety, which contributes to burnout. One study described how different metrics of social media activity, including the user's number of social media accounts and frequency of social media checking, were significantly correlated with higher levels of anxiety. Above all, I think it's created and perpetuated unhealthy expectations, not only academically but physically and emotionally as well. For example, Photoshop and photo manipulating has made it easier than ever to make yourself look better in photos, leading to an unhealthy expectation of what to expect of yourself by comparing to those edited photos. In much of the same way, comparing academic achievements with others makes people more self-conscious about their own efforts. COVID's impact is very interesting, considering the large surge of Gen Z students coming out with their experiences with gifted kid burnout. Whether or not this was due to the isolation caused by COVID or the massive increase of social media use is not 100% known. A study published by NDPI studied adolescent students in university on the risk of developing burnout by their neuroticism and academic achievement on the basis of COVID-19's impact. Many that reported having suffered psychological consequences of the pandemic showed greater emotional exhaustion, neuroticism, and fear of COVID-19, and a lower level of personal accomplishment than those who did not suffer such consequences. This is true even on a broader scale. A study by Mindy M. Kibbe in 2021 found that U.S. students in a COVID-19 hotspot experienced significant increases in anxiety, depression, and health anxiety. They found that fluctuating work hours, whether due to an increase or decrease in number of hours worked, as well as online schooling, will have also likely affected sleep patterns. Many other studies have pointed to a dramatic negative effect on students' mental health, academic achievement, and most importantly, risk of burnout due to isolation, heavier workloads, and fluctuating schedules and lack of academic structure. Adding to this, a shutdown of resources aimed for gifted or twice exceptional students made getting support and guidance to kids that have already struggled with self-guidance and autonomy much worse. The impacts of gifted kid burnout, or burnout in general, goes hand in hand with other conditions, anxiety and depression. But that's just one of the impacts that burnout has. Poor academic performance is one, but even further down the line, can deteriorate relationships, health, job prospects. It can even dictate your entire life. Now, I'm one to talk. Especially when I was a bit younger and my time management was worse, I also made unrealistic goals for myself and then procrastinated on them, and I ended up stressed and burnt out as a result. Even now, I sit here and tell you today about something I myself haven't come close to being able to fix. This brings me to my final point. Lighthouse doesn't really help with this. Let me elaborate on this a bit. Lighthouse's structure is very student-oriented. Students are given assignments and are then placed in charge of managing their time effectively to complete said assignments. Lighthouse has big assignments with more vague goals and broader deadlines, which also makes it harder to manage your time on further out assignments. That all means that there's more responsibility placed on the kids, which makes it easier to procrastinate than ever. This is the student's fault, yes, but that also means that the kids aren't learning as much, since they're procrastinating or simply not doing their work, which reflects poorly on everyone. This is the nature of a self-oriented learning program, but I also feel like many of the students that haven't succeeded at the school have felt isolated and without anyone to help or guide them. Such big projects like inquiries and book challenges can be difficult without a grasp of what to do. And a removal of specialized teachers for things like art and music has made it exceedingly difficult for students to go in depth of what they love doing, which can further attribute to feelings of burnout from the added stress from doing more tedious things that students may not like or know how to do. The bottom line is this. Lighthouse is a school for gifted and talented students that doesn't exactly guide them towards their goals. And again, this is mostly on the students, but they're just that, students. If the goal is to help them, we should add more resources for students to get help for the things they struggle with, such as specialized teachers, more one-on-one meetings, and more guidance on how exactly to make and manage their goals, so as not to overwhelm students and lead to burnout. With the size of Lighthouse, it's understandable that a lot of these suggestions can't be implemented, due to the high turnover rates for teachers and a lack of funding compared to other schools in the district. However, without proper support, Lighthouse students will be deprived of their potential to truly exceed and learn in their future.